In this video, we're going to learn all about the Power Query Group By feature. Now, here are the amazing topics for this video. We'll start off with what is Group By. We'll look at the Table.Group function, and then we have 10 Group By examples where we'll get to see how Group By can help us to do calculations and data analysis. Now let's go over to the sheet Group By Other Tools. Now what is Group By? Well, if you've taken a data set and created a pivot table, a matrix visual in Power BI, or even used worksheet formulas to create a summary report, you know what Group By is. All Group By is it looks at a column, it extracts a unique list, and then based on that unique list, it uses each item as a condition or criteria to make some summary calculation. In this case, we summed the sales. Now, of course, if we have a simple data set like this, and we're in the worksheet, we would use a standard pivot table. If we wanted the solution to update instantly, we'd use worksheet formulas. If we're over in Power BI, we'd use a matrix. If we had big data, we'd use a data model. Or in some cases, we might even be required to write SQL code. But as we saw last video, sometimes Group By is exactly what you need in one of your data transformations. So in this video, we'll learn all about the Group By feature. All right, let's go over to the sheet Group By Power Query. All right, here's our table of data, and we're going to create 1, 2, 3 reports. Our first report, based on a unique list of product, we're going to calculate total sales and then standard deviation for sales, which is just a measure that tells you the variation or spread in the sales data. And then we want, based on each product, a list of the sales reps. All right, to get this data into Power Query, click in a single cell. Data from table or range, or we can use our keyboard, right-click G. Now, we'll give it a good name. We don't need this step, so we'll exit out. Now to Group By Product, we select the column. And there's 3 places we can get Group By. Home, Transform, Group By, or Transform, it's the very first button, or we can right-click, Group By. Here's the Group By dialog box. Advanced just gives us the option of having multiple columns to generate the unique list and multiple aggregations. For the time being, I'm going to keep it basic. We have 1 column. This will generate the unique list of product. The new column name, well, we'll do total sales. And the operation, if we click the drop down, there's only a limited number of aggregate calculations. Now, we're going to select sum, but later we'll see how to hack this list. And then after that, we'll see how to write the M code to do any calculation you want when you're grouping. We'll select sum. We want to sum which column? Sales. Click OK. And there we have our first Group By. Unique list, sum calculation on the grouped records. Remember, for quad, there's actually a table that allows us to work across any of the grouped records. And in a second, we'll actually see a visual of that table. Now, up in the formula bar, we see Table.Group. The first argument is always the previous step, and it's got to be a table. Then we have the field that generates the unique list. And notice from our study so far in Power Query and M Code, whenever we see a list, we know there's an option to have multiple items in that list. And of course, here we're just using 1 column, but later we'll generate the unique list from multiple columns. The third argument is a list within a list because we can have multiple aggregate calculations. And inside the first interior list, there's the name of the column. For each row, we're going to get a sum of sales for each product. And then we can define a data type. Now we want to see how to hack the Group By feature to calculate standard deviation. Now here's the step. I'm going to click the gear icon. This opens up the Group By dialog box. And the reason that this gear icon is here and allows us to open this up is because we're only using standard built-in calculations. Let's click Advanced, Add Aggregation, and I want to call this Standard Deviation. And if I look through the drop down here, I don't see this function. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a placeholder function to allow group by to write some of the M code for us. We're going to temporarily sum on the sales column. Now, here's the gear icon. Watch what happens when I click OK. It's still there because that's a built-in calculation. But if we look up in the formula bar, I can see the second list has exactly what we want. Well, almost. Standard deviation. List.sum, well, we want list.standard deviation and a data type. So I double-click sum, type standard deviation, and there it is, list.standard deviation, tab. And that's all we have to change. Now, when I click at the end, watch what happens to the gear icon when I hit Enter. Look at that. It goes away. And the reason it goes away is anytime inside of Table.Group, if you put as a calculation one of the non-standard calculations that appear up in that dialog box, that gear icon to get back to the dialog box goes away. But we have what we want, standard deviation. Now I'd like to round, so I'm going to come up after each, number dot round, open parentheses. And this rounds a little bit different than the function in the Excel worksheet. It does bankers rounding, which is actually more accurate. This function is like the VBA function or a function in Access, which does halfway even or bankers rounding. Now we want to round to the penny, so we'll add number.round and Enter. And now we have a rounded standard deviation. So we hacked the dialog box to get a placeholder, and then we change the function. Now for our next calculation, I want to try and get a list of sales rep names who sold the particular product. So for this one, we're going to type it out up in the formula bar. So we have 1, 2 calculations. Those are in the interior curly brackets. So I come in between the last curly bracket and the second closed curly bracket, comma, curly brackets. And then in double quotes, we type the name of the new column, comma, and then each, because we want to make a calculation in each row. And for the time being, I want to show you a trick that will allow us for each row to show the entire table of that particular product's records. And of course, as we learned in earlier videos, video number 12, underscore means give me everything in the row. And because we're inside of Table.Group, the thing that's in this row is a table. So watch this when I come to the end and hit Enter. Now in each row, those are the group records. For Quad, here's the group records for Carlota. Now with a table like this, we can do whatever we want. We can work amongst the columns and make the calculations we want. Now actually we only want sales rep, and we don't have to use underscore. We can actually just use our field access operator and type sales rep. I hope I spelled it right. And so that will get a list of the sales rep who sold the product. When I hit Enter, I don't have a table anymore. I have a list. And there's the list of the sales rep who sold Carlota. Now we want a unique list, so we come up and we'll use the function list, since that's a list, dot distinct, open parentheses, and then close after sales rep and Enter. And now if we look in the second row, we have a unique list. Now we want to join those or combine those with a comma. So now we can use after each text.combine. And there's list.combine, comma, and the delimiter in double quotes, comma, space, in double quotes, close parentheses. And now I can come to the end, Enter, and bam, there's the sales reps. All right, after I've added data types and renamed everything, I want to close and load to, put this on the existing sheet, G4, click OK. And so in this first example of grouping, we saw a standard calculation. We saw how to hack the dialog box to get a calculation like standard deviation. And then we created our own M code to do a group by calculation. Now for our next report, we want to rank these grouped sales. Now, if there's no ties, we would just add an index column, 1, 2, 3, 4. But with ties, it gets complicated. At least in the old days with Power Query, it was complicated. Now, there's various ways to rank, but we used to have to group the sales, add an index, and do a few other steps. But Alex at LinkedIn points out that there's a new function. I actually don't know when this function came into existence, but we're so glad it's here. Table.add_rank_column. Now, there's different ways to rank, and they're based on what do you do with a tie. If there's a tie for second and you want 1, 2, 2, 4, then you use something called competition, or you put a 0. In the worksheet, we use rank.eq. If we want dense, that's 1, 2, 2, 3, we can put a 1. There's not a direct worksheet function to do that one. Ordinal, we don't want that one. It's just like adding an index. But if we want to average, like I used to have to do when I built boomerang scoring spreadsheets, we would have to go 1, and if there was a tie, we'd have to take an average. So in this case, it would be 2.5, 2.5, 4. Now in the worksheet, there's rank.av, but luckily, here in Power Query, we can still use a group by trick to get this ranking. Now I already created a query, so we'll double click to open it up. Now I've already done the first step to group sales by product. Now let's see how adding a column with table.rank_add_column works. I'm going to click the F of X. This is a table. That's the previous step. Table.add_rank_column. Open. So the first argument is going to be a table, comma. The second argument is what do we want to call this? I'm going to call it rank 1, 2, 2, 4, comma. And then in a list, we have to say how we should sort this. And the first element is which column we want to sort. And then we have to say order, and I'm going to do descending, so biggest will get first. So that's the list. And then the fourth argument, you have to have a record, rank kind equals, and for us, we want competition or 0. There's the end of the record. Close on the function and enter. And that's a lot easier than how we used to have to do this. Now, I'm going to copy this, F of X, paste, and we don't want add data type. We want custom one. I'm going to rename that. There's the table. The name we're going to give it, this will be the second option, dense. So 1, 2, 2, 3. Everything's the same except for this will be 1. And enter. And there we have 1, 2, 2, 3 as compared to 1, 2, 2, 4. Now here's a glimpse of how we used to have to do it and still have to do it for this average. We're going to go up to add column, add an index from 1. And what we can do is we can group these sales. Since there's a tie, there'll be a record with 2 and 3. Then as a grouping calculation, we'll calculate the average. So right click, group by, advanced, and we'll have a temp with all the rows because we'll need to bring back some of those columns. And this will be rank average, and we want to average the index. Click OK. And now if we look at this second record, there's a tie. There's 2 records we can expand later, but there it is. The average of 2 and 3 is 2.5. Now we expand, and I don't want index or sales. We already have that. Click OK. And there are all the different ranks. Now after I rename everything, you can load this to the worksheet. Now for our 7th group by, we want to see how to use 2 columns to group by. And this would be just like dragging 2 fields into the row area of a pivot table or a matrix visual in Power BI. Let's bring this into the editor. The single cell, right-click G. Now when we select Product and Sales Rep, right-click Group By. This opens up Group By, and Advanced is already open with Product and Sales Rep selected. This will generate the unique list of product and sales reps we need for the report. And then the aggregate calculation for each row, we'll do total sales, sum, sales, click OK. And now if we look up into the Table.Group formula, there's the previous step, and there's our 2 fields to determine the unique list to make our calculation. And then for each row, there's our aggregate calculation. Now let's sort this. And sorting works differently over here in Power Query than it does in the Excel worksheet. Let's sort by product, ascending. All the bellens are together. In the Excel worksheet, if I come over and sort, it would wreck the product sort, but not here. Ascending, that means we get this field sorted within the major field, product. And that's our report. Close and load to the worksheet. So we saw 3, 6, 7 different ways to group by. Now in this first report, I forgot to sort. And the other tools that we looked at, in DAX, concatenate has the last argument that allows us to sort. In the Excel worksheet, we can use the sort function. And over here in Power Query, if we go back into the query, double click, and look at this step up in the formula bar, it's this part right here, which is a list that we want to sort. But luckily, there are so many amazing functions, over 700. There's a list.sort. And very carefully after list.distinct, comma, and in the second argument of list.sort, order.ascending or 0. That's what we want, A to Z. Order.descending is 1. We'll keep it 0. Click at the end and enter. And now everything is sorted. Now let's close and load. And now everything is sorted in the report. Now we've done 7 examples of group by. Let's go down to grade analysis and look at our 8th example. Now for this example, if you're following along in Excel, we'll use this dynamic folder path. If you're going to follow along in Power BI Desktop or Data Flows, you have to import a CSV file. And the CSV file is available for download. And here's the data set: student ID, quarter, class, and grade. And up in advising, people were advising students not to take particular classes together because there's a high probability that they would fail both classes. So what we did is we got a data set. And what we want is we want to get all of the student IDs, that's a particular student, for a particular quarter, and then group those records to look at the classes and the grades. And then we'll join the classes together for a particular student in a particular quarter, do a frequency distribution, and look at the actual classes where students failed both classes. Now over here in Excel, we learned how to create this dynamic file path back in video number 13. I'm going to open this query. If you open this query, it should just work because it's dynamic as long as you have the Excel file and the CSV file in the same location. This is just importing a CSV. We learned about how to do that in video 13. We want to right-click, reference. And the first thing we want to do before we group student and quarter is we just want to remove all of the grades where a student passed the class. So we're going to filter, number filters, less than, and a passing grade is 0.7. Click OK. Now the table is filled with only classes with a failed grade. Now we want to group by to collect all the classes together for student by quarter. So select the 2 columns, right-click, group by. We're going to need to do 2 aggregate calculations. I need to count because we need to know when there's only 1 failed classes because we got to get rid of those. Add an aggregation. This is classes, and we're going to do a placeholder, sum on grade. Click OK. That's our first grouping. We'll click to open the formula bar, and we don't want list.sum. We want a list of classes, so we use our field access operator, and the name of the field is class. Then in the final argument, we'll do type text. Now when I hit enter, I have a count. This student failed criminal law and algebra. This one, communication and ethics. Now we definitely don't want any records with only 1 failed class, so I'm going to uncheck, click OK. Now actually, we don't want this as a list, and of course this is the beauty of Power Query. I forgot. I still need this filter, but I'm going to go back to the previous step. Come up to the formula bar, and after each, text.combine, and the delimiter, comma, double quotes, comma, space, double quotes, close parentheses. And when I hit enter, criminal law, college algebra. So now we have them collected together. When we go filter out the ones, we can simply group by this column. Right click. So this is our second group back to back. And that's it. We want the default, which is to count. Click OK. There's one of the main culprits, English and intermediate algebra for calculus. We definitely want to sort descending. And there's the top culprits, combinations of classes where the student failed both. So English composition, algebra, writing strategies, English composition, English again, psychology, English again, boy, that's one of the main culprits, intermediate algebra. And so after we rename everything, I'm going to load this to the worksheet. All right, so that's a great example of a couple back-to-back group bys to do our analysis. All right, let's go over to the sheet, add blank row. Now we have a table here, and what we don't want to do with a proper data set when we're doing data analysis is to group the records and then add a blank row, because that would destroy the proper data set, and then our data analysis tools wouldn't work very well. But I'm always surprised in the working world how many people actually like and use blank rows. So the task here is to import this, sort, so we get groups actually in the table of products, and then add a blank row. Now the solution we're going to see comes from the Power Query poet, Bill Szysz. Now I've already imported this table, so we'll double click. Now I've already sorted this column because I want the resulting group records to be in alphabetical order. And before we do our group by trick, I want to go and look at something important. It's a trick we'll use during our group by. Let's go over to the query table 1. Up here, I've used a literal to create a hard-coded table. We actually looked at literals back in video number 12. If we do pound table, open parentheses, the first argument of this hard-coded table is as a list, the field names, and then comma. The second argument contains a list within a list that contains our records. There's the element for the P column. There's the element for the S column. And that's the second record in the table. Over here, we've done the same thing. Now, we're going to use a table literal, but we're also going to need to join tables. Remember, when we use Table.Combine, we have tables in a list. But here we actually have two tables. If we go down to the query join operator to append tables, no way. We can just take two tables, use the ampersand, the join operator, and it appends the two tables. So let's go back over to add blank rows after groups. So our first step is going to be to right-click product, group by. We're going to call this temp, and we're going to do operation give me all rows. Remember, when we do this operation, it just gives us a table of the group records. OK, and so in each row, we have exactly what we want. Let's go up to the formula bar. And for the time being, I'm going to remove everything. This is just a record that's defining the data types, and we don't need that. And if we remember, what does underscore do? It delivers a table. So the M code right here is a table object. Close parentheses. Actually, backspace, I forgot curly curly to close off the list within the list. There's the name of the new column, the calculation. Close and enter. Now let's look at each table. We have 3 fields. And if we want to append this with some other table, well, we can have one or more fields. And what we're going to do is we're going to create, using a literal right after the underscore, we're going to create a single column table called product with a null. Then if we try to append these 3 columns with a single table called product with a null, well, the product will line up. The other 2 fields have no corresponding field, so they'll just get null values. Now, just to see the table literal, we'll come back and put the underscore in. Let's type pound or hashtag table, open parentheses. As a list, we're going to have a single field called product. And then after that list of field names, comma, then we have a list within a list. and we're only going to have one element, and it's null. That's a keyword that we'll put in null. And there's a close on table. There's the double list close on this aggregation. Come to the end and enter. Now all we did here is we just wanted to visualize. Remember, here's the table in each row. Now we simply have to append. And how do we append tables? Well, underscore is a full table, and we join. So that's our group by trick. The underscore is the group records in each row. We have our table with a null, and when I hit enter, now we have, if we look down here at the bottom for each table, a group set of records with a null at the bottom. Now, we need to join these, and let's think about this. Table.Group, what is that delivering? It's delivering a table. If I want to use Table.Combine, I need all these tables as a list. So how do I extract a column as a list from a table object? I use my field access operators, and then the name of the field. When I hit enter, now I have the step before combining a list with tables. So now up in the formula bar, Table.Combine, come to the end, close parentheses, and enter. And bam, there's our table. We have our group records and a null or blank record between each set of grouped records. Now we can come to the end right here because there's a third element we can put into this list of lists, type table. Hopefully I put it in the right place and enter. Now after I rename everything, this has already been loaded, so I can close and load. Now I want to come over and right click, load to. We'll change the load location. I'm going to put it right there, click OK. And there's our crazy table that's now difficult to do data analysis with, but we accomplished our goal, and we used a cool group by trick from Bill Szysz. Now our next example is on the sheet consecutive. And whereas everything we've learned so far with group by can be done with other tools quite easily. The example here, we're going to see that Power Query Group By can do it much easier than other tools. Now here's our situation. We have some Oakland A's baseball data. Here's losses and wins, and this is the report we want. We just want to know the consecutive streaks for wins and losses. Now the thing about this is Group By is going to make this amazingly easy. Here's how we'd have to do it with formulas, and it is not easy. Now also, other examples in business, one of your homework problems will require that you do one of these consecutive occurrence reports. Now I've already brought this table into Power Query. We're going to double click consecutive win-loss report. Now here's our applied steps. And anytime you're doing a consecutive occurrence report on some particular field, it's got to have some sort order to have any meaning. So for us, we sorted by date. That's this step. Now when we do group by, let's just do it first, and then we'll see the very small tweak that we have to do to get it to be consecutive occurrences. Let's right-click Group By. Now we're definitely going to count as one of our Group By calculations, but we're also going to show the min and max dates. So let's add an aggregation. And for the label, we'll call it dates. And as part of the calculation, we're going to need to look up the min date. So as a placeholder, I'm just going to do min date. Now let's click OK. And notice we have a gear icon. And the reason we have a gear icon, as we mentioned earlier, is because we used all of the built-in automatic features that are available in that dialog box. And of course, when we use the built-in feature, Group By does exactly what it's supposed to do, a unique list, and then some aggregate calculation. But there's a fourth argument in the Table.Group function. And we actually saw an example of this fourth argument back in video number 12. The first argument of Group By is the previous step. There's the field to group, and here's our aggregate calculations for grouping. But if we come to the end, there's the end of the double curly brackets for our list within a list. If we type a comma, there it is. this option was not in our dialog box. If we enter something into this argument, that gear icon will go away. Now group kind, if we type group kind, global is the default. That's where we get a unique list and account. But if we do local, and I'm going to double click, that's what gets Table.Group to do consecutive occurrences. Now we can put a 0 for local. So I'm going to do that. 0, click at the end, and that simple little addition, watch the gear icon. When I hit enter, that's exactly what we want. That is so much easier than doing those crazy array formulas for a report like this. But the gear icon is gone. Now we do want to create a text label for each group up here, and if we try to treat a date as part of a text formula, we'll get an error because data types matter in Power Query. We can't easily mix data types. So before we create our text formula that will say whatever the min date is to the max date, we have to convert this date to text. And we have, just as we saw number.from earlier, we have text from, and whatever it is, it'll convert it to text. Well, let's just see what this will give us. We'll change type to text, click at the end and enter. Well, that's exactly what we want. There's that lovely left alignment. Now actually let's copy this. Control C, and right after that little formula element, we're going to join it to, in double quotes, space to, space, and double quote, join it to Control V, and all we have to change is change in to AX. And now when I hit enter, there's our lovely group by calculation. And that's our report. We can close and load to. This is a picture, so I'm going to move it out of the way. Right click, load to, table. That's perfect. Click OK. Here's the moment of truth. This was April data, and it looked kind of hit and miss, but we just got May data. So I'm going to highlight all of that, Control C, and incorporate it into the table object. Click below, Control V, right click, refresh, and there's our updated report with some depressing news from April 29th to May 8th, 9 consecutive losses. All right, so in this video, we did 10 awesome examples of group by. We saw the fourth magical argument in Table.Group to do consecutive occurrence reports. We saw this great trick from Bill Szysz about how to add a blank row after each group. We saw group by to create a failed class combination report. And we started it off by looking at the basics of group by. We saw how to use the dialog box for group by, how to hack that dialog box, build our own M code for group by. We saw 3 different ways to rank, and we also saw that we can use multiple columns for grouping. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe, because there's always lots more videos to come from excelisfun. And next MECS video is going to be all about DAX.